How's it going, everyone? So we're doing some reflections from this week's council meeting, and what we've done is, for your interest, hopefully to make it interesting, we've each chosen 3 questions that the other person doesn't know what they are, and we're going to ask them. But like, the intention is to do a little bit more of a reflection, deeper reflection on what happened at the meetings, because you can go to our various social media platforms to get the detailed feedback.
Okay, I'm going to go first and ask you a question so that I'm not under pressure. Daisy, if you could tell someone just one thing that happened at the meeting, what would you choose and why?
That's a good question.
Yes, I'm very clever.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting because the meeting was, we had 2 meetings. One was a policing committee meeting and the other was a council meeting. So altogether 3 hours of meeting, more or less. The council meeting itself was 2 hours. Probably would have been longer, except the COVID restrictions are restricting us from the amount of time we meet. So if I had to go through everything, I would probably say the motion on the fire service. And the reason why I would only tell the story of that probably is because it's such a big story, and it's a story that has a long history which predates us sitting on the council. However, we have had an opportunity to bring that to the table by way of motion, and the detail of the motion insofar as asking for an independent review as a matter of urgency, and for that review to consider the important aspects of what a fire service should have in order to be sustainable, in order to respond to the emerging needs of the growth of the Greater Bray area and the emerging needs of firefighters. So for that to be, like, even for that motion to be there was important for us, for it to be debated, for it to be discussed. And then I suppose for the fact that the motion got combined with another motion that was also expressing the need for a review of the fire service, and for the combined dimension of both motions to get unanimous support and really, passionate inputs from other councillors, and very genuine. That would be, if that was the only takeaway from the meeting. And because and what's interesting about it as well is, without going on about it, it's one small step towards something. So we take a moment, we appreciate that there was unanimous support, we respect that, but it should only be, for me, considered a small step towards a wider issue. But as we know, like, every step matters, so yes, it is significant in its own right.
Good answer.
Thank you. So my question for you, so we had, it's the beginning of September, and that's when we've met. We did not meet in August. We've had, because of COVID, scenarios where we have met in physical form, in real life, IRL, and we have met virtually with varying degrees of success, and I suppose the reality is that virtual meetings do not have, are not places where statutory work can happen. But my question is, how significant / important is the flow of meetings in terms of councillors getting a chance to meet every month in the physical sense, and what's the impact of that not happening?
Yeah, I think okay, there's so many dimensions to that. The first one is, like you said, so to get unanimous support for the motion on the fire service is really important. Sometimes things are contentious and people vote different ways, and that's grand. We all are different people with different perspectives of the way things should be done. But sometimes when you have all 8 of us saying this is where we stand, that's a force to be reckoned with. And I think that's harder to garner when you're not meeting in person. So there is times, especially me as a newbie, you know, I'm proposing something, and I can get a sense by where the other 7 are by looking around at them and reading their body language, or if they're looking at me, or they're listening, or they look kind of confused, and then I know I'm losing them here. Just that interpersonal. It's not just to say cliched, oh yeah, it's nice to be in person. It really, you need those signals if you're going to work together with a team. So I think that in terms of getting stuff done, getting us all on the same page, working through ideas, it's much more conducive to do that in person. Secondly, like, it's always the way, like, you don't know what you pick up in the chats on the way in, the way out. How did you get on with this? Or have you had a follow up with that issue? And you don't have to take up time then where all other people in the meeting are looking and listening to you, because on Zoom you can't have a one-on-one. Whereas if there's an issue that doesn't warrant everyone to know about it, because it's just a follow up or a check in, you can do that in real life. Now it's more difficult, social distancing, but if you're 2 meters away from someone, you can just say, oh, by the way, did you see that? Oh no, I'll send you a text, or I'll sort that out. So I think that's really important. And then finally, the biggest impact of all is that it's about how much we value our democratic spaces. So Zoom meetings, people aren't tuning in, and they can't, and the press weren't there. Whereas the press can come now. It is limited, the public gallery, but they had it streaming to a different room to watch if you want. And I think it's important that people know in Bray, once a month, there are people in a room representing them, debating all the big issues. And it's not just happening online, that we're there doing it. And I think the impact of that is that we value our democracy. So does that answer your question?
It does. Very good.
Okay, my second question. This is a bit of a curveball now, but and you can interpret it whether it was the contents or how it goes, or COVID or whatever. But my question is, what was the most frustrating thing about the meeting?
What was the most frustrating thing about the meeting? Yeah, so probably you know, and I guess it's a feature of meetings across the board, or if you're teaching or you're delivering a training course and there's a finite amount of time. And it kind of links in with the question that I asked you about the flow of meetings and the regularity of them, that for me, it gets frustrating when you run out of time and you can't. So we have a function in the meetings in normal circumstances where you can ask for an extension of time. And we know for stories from the past where people have really kind of burn the midnight oil, as they say, where you don't want to leave until you resolve something, and you know, councillors commit to that. Whereas you know, it felt we were under pressure to complete the meeting within a 2-hour time frame, and it just felt like to push beyond that brings us into a different space in terms of how the protective dimension of managing COVID and sharing spaces with others the risk increases the longer you spend time in a space, I suppose. So yeah, that was frustrating because there were issues that required or would have benefited from more time, and that kind of gets inside me when I know that it's another month before we have a space like this again, where you've lost momentum from, you know, a solid 4 weeks of in between. And especially, like, I refer to the issue that you brought up about the ask for an extension on the planning permission down on the old Bray golf course, which is like such an important issue that you really want to be able to, like, the pressure was on to tell the story of the issue, bring everyone up to speed, try and get everyone on the same page, because there are different interpretations, different insights, different levels of depth. Because we wrote a submission on that issue, we're deep enough into the whereas some people may not be there, and you want to bring them there so that the conversation can be, you know, worthwhile, so that people can contribute based on a sense of understanding and knowledge, and that you can bring it somewhere to a resolution. So it felt that there was tension caused by the time frustration that we were at the end, or we were close to the end, and it didn't feel like we had the luxury or the capacity to extend time and really get into a proper, important discussion about a topic. So, you know, you're under pressure to make a decision, you're trying to make a proposal, and you lose something.
Yeah, I felt
so
that too.
For me, it was the most frustrating part of the.
Would agree.
And I bet you're dying to give your what's frustrating for you, are you? No?
No, I transcend frustration.
Ah, well played. My question might be related. So, like, there's a contrast between Wicklow County Council, and there's an ongoing issue for us, and then Bray Municipal District Council, and this is relating to motions. So in the world of politics, there are these things called motions. I think we've talked about them before on a podcast. But tell me, for you, what is the importance and, again, significance, relevance of motions when it comes to the political meetings, county council meetings, both Bray or Wicklow, but mainly Bray, because maybe Bray is where we've been in the last week. Wicklow, where will it be next week? So if you want to touch on the Wicklow, if you want to talk about frustration,
because and Daisy's saying frustration because in Wicklow the motions have been on the agenda for almost a year and we haven't got to speak about them. So the reason why, so the way that a county council or a Bray municipal district meeting works is we get the agenda and has the same things on it every month. So the minutes of the last meeting, then the housing report, what kind of building is going on, roads and pathways. We discussed that. We might discuss the Florentine Centre, get an update. At the moment, we're getting updates on the reopening Bray committee from COVID. And so those things are quite set. And then motions are where you can put anything down to make an argument. So that's where you can show your passion and your priorities. So, for example, besides the fire service motion, we had a few. I had one about speed ramps in Fassaro, around a dangerous corner there. You had one on a dog park. And I had three other ones. So one was on participatory budgeting. So you had one like that last year. And it was that we would set out the strategy for basically in November when we have some money in Bray. What do you want us to spend it on? And how are we going to ask you that? And I got some homework from that where I'm going to come back and see how write out a draft strategy and send it to the 8. So I'm excited about that. And then I had two other motions. So one was about a HAP place finder for Bray. So if you are on HAP, which is housing assistance payment, so you access the private rental market if you're struggling in terms of your housing need. But there's a big problem there where there's not enough gaffs in Bray, really, so people are struggling to get that. So we think somebody should be in that role part-time or full-time to support them to get that. And then the other motion was about having a homeless outreach service. So at the moment, if you're homeless or at risk of homelessness in Bray, you have to travel to Wicklow County Council buildings to present as homeless. And that's expensive to do and, logistically challenging. Especially if can you imagine if you have kids and you don't drive or whatever. So it was that service should be provided from the Bray office. So both of those things were discussed or all of those things were discussed and they'll be brought back to Wicklow to be actioned, I guess. So motions they're the way that when you see a problem coming up again and again and again, you can put forward a policy solution and try and get that on the record that the way that we do things needs to change because of X, or don't forget about Y is a priority.
And sometimes they go to a vote, and again, there might be differing views about what your motion is proposing. So motions usually start with that this council will, or something to that effect. So it's also it sparks debate and discussion, and can bring out interesting insight into different political ideologies or different emphasis on priorities or different outlooks or insights into issues.
So your final question is in regards to the Bray meeting on Tuesday, Daisy. What gave you hope at the meeting? The most Grace question of all time. If anything.
Yeah, so like, where would I look for hope in a council meeting? So yeah, I guess for me in general, I would look for, so the reason why I'm involved in politics and presented myself to be elected was about change. Both of us use the same expression, the same tagline. So in order for me to continue, in order for me to continue to give energy, to give headspace, to commit to, the work of politics, I need to draw hope as something that feeds into change. So if I have hope that we are on a pathway towards potential change, then that hope is transformed into energy, which is also momentum for me. So I take hope from, the fact that the councillors present on the night all were able to agree on an important motion about the fire service. I also take hope, hope doesn't have to be huge either. For me, that I can take hope from the fact that we still have opportunities to articulate what we think is important, and that we have a platform to share our views. So when we talk about, which is part of my next question to you, so I won't go into it too much, but when we talk about how we consult or how we work with community or constituents, you have to believe that how you present that in the meeting gives scope for it to improve or for things to get better.
Yes.
So unless I get completely shut down and completely dismissed, I like to bring ideas and proposals to a council meeting, and I like to frame it in a way that says, I have a feeling things could be better if we look at it this way, rather than I'm against this, I'm for this. I like to try and build a space for the potential for something to happen in a certain way that might produce a positive outcome. So every time I get a sense of that, I could call that hope.
Yes.
And the hope is that the council will continue to evolve or grow or function in a way that serves people and serves them, and it serves them, but is also with them in any kind of journey of change for Bray, improvement for Bray, the greater Bray area, in as positive a sense as possible. Was that a fluffy enough answer for your fluffy question?
Yeah.
So my final question for you is that and you may disagree with this, but there's, if I was to propose to you that there is a distance between community and political decision making, and that distance was and has been apparent recently in Bray, would you agree that the distance between political decision making and people is too great, or is it good enough considering the restraints and challenges? Is it hard work? Is it worthy work? So the effort of involving people in, or bringing a proximity between people and the decision-making structures. Is there a distance from your point of view? And how is that real for you? And B, is it worth the work to shorten the distance, and how would you do that?
Yeah, okay. Is there a distance? Yes. Like, I'm actually, what comes to mind is more national politics even than local. But like, when you're talking about, how often have you seen, God, that was a good decision by a politician ever said? It's not. There is a distance, and I actually could hypothesize why it happens. Is sometimes this job feels like juggling 10 million ideas all at once, and then you're just firefighting. So you're not, and if the structures aren't there within which to have constant feedback that you can rely on, then you could easily fall in the trap of just trying to get the next email done, the next motion in, and then you're further and further away. And before you know it, you look back and go, I'm further away than I meant to be. And then I think I'd like to answer it more personally as a public rep, because for me, when I know that I have 10, 20, 30 people behind me on an idea, that gives me the confidence to believe in it and push and doubt myself less. So I think there's something for us to be gained by involving people, not just because it's good practice that people decide how their lives are managed and lived and ruled over or whatever, but because I think it would make the job easier for me. Like, so we're talking about the participatory budgeting. So what does that look like? I mean, there's technology online or systems now where you would put in, say, the amount that it was, and you can just drag little spectrums to where you would spend the money. So it's like you're in the driver's seat and you just decide, and then you submit it. And the more people that do that, then the councillors can look at that data and say, well, if most people want their priority to be this, then let's go for that. So for me, if I have to guess where everyone is, or I have to kind of go off my informal connections with people, that's not as solid as the data being in front of you. And good decision making comes from good data. And then I think the benefit is twofold. One, that people will actually get what they need because they'll be able to express what they need. But two, there will be less anti-politic sentiment because people will be a part of it. Like, I don't mind taking on the day-to-day, and it's my privilege to, absolutely. And, I don't expect people to all be county councillors and cross all the issues the way I need to be. But I want people to feel a part of the work that I'm doing because I think that's better for everyone, them and me and the system.
And where does the cynicism come into it? Is that, when a decision is made? Because I could have asked you about the distance between elected members and decision making, because sometimes that's an issue. Whereas we become the target of people's outrage about a decision that's made, let's say bollards, let's say kind of, changes that are imposed without, consultation and unpacking the why of that. And because, that feeds into a cynicism about politics and how it operates and who has power and who wields it. And that's also a distance issue. Yeah,
because I wonder, do people know that? I know I was explaining it to someone in my family recently and they didn't, that like there's people who work full-time for the council and they have jobs to do the day-to-day running of the town, but they do that without consulting us. And maybe you can understand that the pressure is on, and how do they do that? Again, like I'm saying, if the system is not there for you to rely on to do consultation with elected members and with the public, then you're just going to firefight and do whatever. But then we end up, it's a horrible situation where I'll get an email about a change that's happening in the town from a constituent and I haven't been told by the council. And we're trying to improve that in a way that says, if you're under pressure, but you appreciate consultation, then let us all work together to try and improve it for you and for us. I think is a fair enough kind of a synopsis of where we're at.
Yeah, so the easy thing would be to just criticize where the challenges are. But a real contribution, I guess, could be to try and be co-architects of how things could be better, how a communication might improve, or how a system might be smoother, or how we can collaborate. That's again easy to say.
But that's why I'm excited to do this proposal about participatory budgeting. So that, imagine everyone in Bray has an online or otherwise, because I'm mindful some people aren't online, but vote about how we spend some of our discretionary funding. That'd be class. And it's okay, yeah, it might take us a little while to get there, but let's aim to get there and let's do some research and put the time and effort in, which was another part of your question. Yes, it's definitely worth it.
Because then I guess if people buy into the process, and whether they get what they want in the end or not, if the process honors them, then there's a better chance of collective responsibility for what the final outcome is. And there's nothing more. And it doesn't mean either that someone, like, I could have let's say I'm the boss of something, which is not true in any sense. But I think I have a deadly idea, and I know it's a solid, deadly idea, and I convince myself of that, and I go ahead and just implement it. people could think, yeah, that's actually a deadly idea. That was brilliant. And other people could go, that's rubbish. That's absolutely rubbish. But what's missing either on both sides of that is, you know, who like, do I then celebrate my idea being realized? And all it requires for me is for someone to say, imagine you had a thought about this. And an honest me would say, that's 100% true. Yeah. So I would rather preempt that by saying, let's get all the ideas, good, bad, indifferent. Let's have an honorable process of how they become, how they're presented, how they're shared, and then that the ultimate decision is something that we're all willing to accept, even if it's not, you know, if we don't agree, or it wasn't our idea, or, you know, what if because I guess many of the processes are competitive in nature, because there's finite amounts of money. There's limitations in terms of what can be done, where you can do it, how it can be delivered. But yeah, I think the more collective responsibility people have, and that's not easy either. And people get a free pass if they don't have to be. The easiest thing in the world is to rubbish. Oh, that's the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. And they don't have to feel any obligation, because if they weren't part of the process, then all they can do is sit in the sidelines and go, that's dirt. Yeah. Whereas if you know, if you could say, well, so yeah, you must have had a different idea, or which one did you vote for, or where? Again, it's like people, yeah.
Something we care about deeply, you can see.
Participation. So that'll be exciting to see the how of that, and I think it'll be worth a pilot, as we say in the business. Let's try it and reflect on it, and then see if it can be improved or enhanced next time around.
And I think it's interesting because it's, you know, so it was a 2-hour meeting, but look at the amount of work, ideas, follow-ons that have come out of it. Like, I have a page open there, follow-up list of all the things I need to do. It could be checking up on an email, sending things back to a constituent, letting people know about. So although we only meet once a month, and that can be frustrating, all of the work that goes into that 2 hours or 3 hours being productive and delivering is major. But hopefully we do an all right job.
And we have a Wicklow County Council meeting next Monday.
How many pages do we have to read?
I was going to say, like, that's exactly what was in my head. How many pages? I'm going to tell you right now.
I haven't looked.
I was going to say 134.
I'm going to guess
134. But then there's a few extras that have landed. Well, no, I have also the Joint Policing Committee meeting on Monday also. I think the chief, the commissioner might be coming. I know he was meant to, and then COVID happened, so I'm not sure about that. So that'll be interesting.
And then I'm sure we'll have updates on the Wicklow meeting on our socials as well.
We will.
Try our best.
Thanks for your time. Thanks for tuning in. Anyone who
lasted this long.
Tuning in. Half an hour.